My name isn't important, but at the time, I was 26 years old and living alone in a small rental house in a quiet suburb in the United States. I worked a regular job, came home at the same time every night, and didn't have much going on outside of work. My life was simple and predictable. Nothing about that day stood out. It was just another normal evening. I remember getting home around 7 p.m. The neighborhood was calm, the kind where people parked on the street and left their porch lights on. Kids played outside earlier in the day, and by evening, everything went quiet. I unlocked my front door, stepped inside, and locked it behind me without thinking. I did that every day. It was automatic. Inside, the house felt the same as always.
No mess. No strange smells. No sounds.
I put my keys on the counter, kicked off my shoes, and turned on the living room light. I reheated leftovers and sat on the couch, scrolling through my phone while the TV played in the background. Nothing felt off. At least not at first. Around 8 p.m., I got up to get a drink from the kitchen. As I walked past the hallway, I noticed the door to the guest room was open. I stopped for a second. I was sure I had closed it that morning before leaving for work. I stood there, looking at it, trying to remember if I had gone in there earlier. I told myself I probably forgot. It didn't seem important. I closed the door and went back to the couch. A few minutes later, I heard a sound. It was faint, almost easy to ignore. It sounded like something brushing against the floor. Not a loud noise. Not a bang. Just a soft movement coming from deeper inside the house. I muted the TV and listened. Nothing happened. I sat there for another minute, telling myself old houses make noise. Pipes shift. Floors creak. I'd lived there for almost a year. I knew the sounds. Or, at least I thought I did. Then I heard it again. This time, it was clearer. A slow, careful sound. Like footsteps trying not to be heard. I didn't move. I didn't call out. I just sat there, staring down the hallway, feeling a strange pressure in my chest. My heart started beating faster, but my body felt heavy, like it didn't want to react yet. That was the moment I realized something was wrong. Because whatever made that sound wasn't outside. It was already inside my house. The house I was living in wasn't big or old. It was a single-story rental with 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a narrow hallway that connected everything. It sat on a quiet street lined with similar houses, most of them owned by families or older couples. Nothing about it felt creepy. That was actually why I chose it. I wanted something simple and safe. It was early winter, and the days were getting shorter. That night, the sun had already set by the time I got home. Outside, the air was cold and still. No wind.
No rain.
Just one of those silent evenings where sound seems to travel farther than it should. Inside the house, the heater clicked on and off, pushing warm air through the vents. The lights gave off a soft yellow glow that made everything feel normal and lived in. I was there because I had nowhere else to be. I wasn't expecting company. I wasn't hosting anyone. My routine was the same almost every night. Come home, eat something simple, watch TV, and go to bed early. I didn't drink much. I didn't party. I didn't stay out late. I liked keeping things predictable. I lived alone, but I talked to my parents a few times a week. They lived in another state. I also had a neighbor across the street, an older guy who waved sometimes but mostly kept to himself. We didn't really talk. That night, I hadn't seen or heard anyone outside when I pulled into the driveway. After dinner, I cleaned up the kitchen and checked my phone. No missed calls. No messages. I remember thinking how quiet everything felt.
Not in a bad way. Just calm.
The kind of quiet you don't question because it happens every night. I locked the front door, checked the back door like I always did, and made sure the windows were closed. It was a habit I picked up after moving in. The landlord had told me the neighborhood was safe, and I believed him. There hadn't been any break-ins that I knew of. I never had a reason to feel nervous there. By the time I sat back down on the couch, it was close to 9 p.m. The TV was on low. The lights in the hallway were off, but the living room was fully lit. The house felt empty, in a normal way. Like it was supposed to. Nothing had happened yet.
There were no sounds.
No movement. No reason to think anything was wrong. That's what made it easy to ignore the feeling that started creeping in. The small sense that something was different, even though everything looked the same. At that moment, I still believed I was alone. I stayed on the couch for a while, trying to focus on the TV. The show was something I'd already seen before, so I wasn't really paying attention. My eyes kept drifting toward the hallway. It was darker than the rest of the house, and from where I sat, I could see the open space where the bedrooms were. Nothing moved. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. A few minutes passed, and I heard a soft sound coming from the back of the house. It wasn't loud enough to scare me right away. It sounded like a foot brushing against carpet.
Slow.
Controlled. The kind of noise that stops you from reacting because you're not sure it was real. I muted the TV again and listened. The house went quiet. Too quiet. Even the heater didn't kick on. I sat there, holding my breath without realizing it. After about 30 seconds, I let out a breath and told myself I was overthinking things. Then I heard it again. This time, the sound came from the hallway. A light creak, like someone shifting their weight. The floors in that part of the house didn't usually creak. I had lived there long enough to know which boards made noise and which ones didn't. I stood up slowly and took a few steps toward the hallway, stopping just before the light faded into darkness. I didn't turn on the hallway light. I don't know why. I think part of me didn't want to see anything. I just stood there listening. That's when I noticed the smell. It was faint, but it didn't belong. A mix of sweat and something stale, like clothes that hadn't been washed in a long time. I hadn't smelled it when I got home. It seemed to be coming from farther down the hall, near the bedrooms. My heart started beating faster, but I stayed calm. I told myself it could be the heater pushing air from somewhere I hadn't noticed before. I tried to come up with normal explanations. As I turned to walk back to the living room, I heard a quiet exhale. It didn't sound like air moving through a vent. It sounded like a person breathing through their nose. Slow and steady. Close enough that it made the hair on my arms stand up. I froze. I didn't want to move. I didn't want to make a sound. I listened carefully, hoping it would stop. It didn't. The breathing stayed there, just beyond the edge of the light, like whoever it belonged to was standing still, waiting. I felt a tight pressure in my chest, the kind you get when your body knows something before your mind does. My instincts were telling me not to go any farther. I took one step back. The breathing stopped. That's when I knew for sure that whatever was in my house was aware of me. I stayed still for a long moment, listening for any sound at all. My ears rang from how quiet the house had become. The breathing was gone, but that somehow made it worse. It felt like the person in the hallway had pulled back, not left. Like he was adjusting. I slowly stepped backward into the living room and reached for my phone on the coffee table. I didn't unlock it yet. I just held it, trying to decide what to do next. Calling the police felt extreme, but walking down that hallway felt impossible. From where I stood, I could see the edge of the hallway wall. The darkness beyond it looked thicker than before. The air felt heavy, and the smell I noticed earlier was stronger now. It wasn't moving through the vents. It was coming from a specific place. Then I heard a soft sound again. This time it was a footstep. It came from the hallway, slow and careful, followed by another. Whoever was there wasn't trying to rush.
He was taking his time.
I watched as a shadow stretched across the floor, just barely touching the edge of the living room light. I took another step back until my legs hit the couch. There was nowhere else to go. Behind me was the front door. To my left was the kitchen. To my right was the hallway where the sound was coming from. The shadow moved again. I saw part of a leg now. A shoe. Dark and worn. It stopped just short of the light, like the person didn't want to fully step into view. I could tell he was facing me. I could feel it. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. I didn't scream.
I didn't speak.
I kept my eyes locked on that spot, waiting for something to happen. The heater clicked on suddenly, breaking the silence. The sound made me flinch. When I looked back, the shoe was gone. A second later, I heard movement behind me. I turned fast. The kitchen light was off, but I could see the outline of someone near the counter. He had moved without making a sound. I hadn't heard him pass me. I hadn't heard anything at all. That's when panic finally hit. I realized he knew the layout of the house. He knew where the light was. He knew where I was standing. I was no longer just uncomfortable. I was trapped inside my own home with someone who didn't want to be seen yet. The moment I saw his outline near the kitchen counter, my body reacted before my mind did. I backed away fast and slammed my hand against the wall, reaching for the light switch. The kitchen light snapped on, and for half a second, I saw him clearly. He was standing less than 10 feet away from me. He was tall, wearing a dark jacket and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. His clothes looked dirty, like he hadn't changed in days. His eyes locked onto mine immediately. There was no surprise on his face.
No confusión.
It looked like he had been expecting this moment. Neither of us spoke. I turned and ran. I went straight for the front door, my feet slipping on the hardwood floor. I grabbed the handle and twisted it hard. It didn't open. My stomach dropped. I remembered locking it earlier. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely work the deadbolt. Behind me, I heard fast footsteps. They were heavy now. No longer careful. I unlocked the door and pulled it open just as I felt something brush past my shoulder. I stumbled forward onto the porch and fell hard onto the concrete. Pain shot through my hands, but I didn't stop. I scrambled to my feet and ran toward the street, yelling as loud as I could. I didn't look back. I ran to my neighbor's house across the street and pounded on the door with both fists. My chest burned and my vision felt narrow. I could hear movement behind me, but I didn't know if it was him or my own footsteps echoing in my head. The door opened, and I rushed inside without waiting for permission. My neighbor looked confused and alarmed, but the moment he saw my face, he shut the door and locked it. I told him someone was in my house. I couldn't even get the words out properly. He grabbed his phone and called 911 while I stood there shaking, staring at the front window. From the porch, I could see my house clearly. The front door was still open. A few seconds later, a figure stepped into the doorway. He didn't run. He didn't chase me. He just stood there looking out toward the street.
Toward me.
Even from that distance, I could tell he was watching the neighbor's house, watching where I had gone. Then he turned and walked back inside. By the time the police arrived, my house was empty. They searched every room, every closet, every space someone could hide. There were signs of forced entry at the back door, mud on the floor, a window unlocked that I knew I had closed. But he was gone, and I knew one thing for sure. If I had hesitated even a few seconds longer, I wouldn't have made it out at all. I didn't go back into my house that night. The police told me to stay at my neighbor's place until they finished their report. I sat on his couch with a blanket around my shoulders, answering the same questions over and over. What did he look like? How long had I been home? Was anything missing? I kept telling them I didn't know. Everything had happened too fast. About an hour later, one of the officers came back inside. He was holding a small evidence bag. Inside it was my spare key. I stared at it for a long time before I understood what he was showing me. I kept my spare key hidden in a fake rock near the back of the house. Only the landlord and I were supposed to know about it. I hadn't told anyone else. The officer asked me when I last used it. I told him it had been months. He nodded and told me they found the rock slightly out of place, like it had been handled recently. That meant he didn't break in that night.
He had let himself in.
They searched the house more carefully after that. In the guest room closet, behind a stack of old boxes, they found signs someone had been staying there. There was a flattened towel on the floor, empty water bottles, food wrappers shoved deep into the trash bag. Everything hidden carefully, like he didn't want it noticed. Then they found something that made my stomach drop. In my bedroom, inside my closet, pushed into the far corner, was a backpack I had never seen before. Inside were extra clothes, gloves, duct tape, and a small flashlight. At the bottom of the bag was a folded piece of paper. It was my work schedule, printed out, marked with times. Notes written in pen. The officer told me they believed he had been inside the house before I ever heard him. Maybe days. Maybe weeks. He would leave when I left for work and come back when the house was empty.
He knew my routine.
He knew when I slept. He knew when I was alone. That's why he didn't run when I saw him. He wasn't surprised. He had been waiting for the right moment. The realization hit me all at once. The open guest room door. The smell in the hallway. The breathing I heard in the dark.
He wasn't sneaking in that night.
He was already home. The police never caught him. No fingerprints that matched. No cameras on my street. The landlord admitted later that a previous tenant had complained about strange noises, but moved out suddenly, without explanation. I moved out a week later. Even now, what scares me most isn't seeing him in my house. It's knowing that for who knows how long, he watched me live my normal life. And I never noticed at all. I moved out of that house within a week. I didn't go back alone, even once. Friends helped me pack during the day, and I avoided the hallway as much as I could. Every time I walked past the guest room, I felt my chest tighten. I kept expecting to see someone standing there just out of sight. The police followed up a few times, but nothing came of it. There were no arrests.
No suspects.
No reports that matched what happened to me. After a while, the calls stopped. To them, it was an open case with no leads. To me, it was something that never really ended. I tried to go back to normal life. I got a new place across town. Different locks. Security cameras. Motion lights. I checked everything every night before bed. I told myself I was being careful, not paranoid.
Still, small things started bothering me.
Sometimes I would come home and feel like the air in my apartment was different, like it had already been disturbed. Nothing was moved. Nothing was missing. But the feeling was there.
Heavy. Familiar.
A few months later, I got a call from my old landlord. He told me the house had been broken into again. This time, no one was living there. No valuables inside. Just signs of someone staying overnight. Food wrappers. A blanket. The back door unlocked. The police couldn't say for sure it was the same person. But I knew. What haunts me most is something one of the officers said before they left that first night. He told me cases like this don't always end the way people expect. Some intruders don't steal. They don't hurt anyone right away. They watch. They wait. They learn routines. Sometimes they move on. Sometimes they don't. Even now, I double-check my locks, even during the day. I don't leave spare keys outside anymore. I keep lights on in rooms I'm not using. I listen carefully when the house is quiet. Because late at night, when everything else is still, I swear I can sometimes hear the same soft sound I heard that night. Slow footsteps. Careful breathing. And I can't stop wondering if he ever really left. Or if he's just waiting until I feel alone again. I moved out of that house within a week, but leaving didn't bring the relief I thought it would. I kept expecting that once I was somewhere new, the fear would fade. It didn't. It followed me quietly, settling into my daily routine the same way he once had. My new apartment was on the 3rd floor of a secured building. You needed a key fob to get inside. There were cameras in the lobby and bright lights in the parking lot. On paper, it was safer, in every way. Still, the first few nights, I barely slept. Every small noise pulled me awake. A pipe knocking. Someone walking in the hallway outside. An elevator door closing. I started checking my locks more than once. I'd lock the door, walk away, then come back and check it again. Sometimes I'd stand there, hand on the knob, listening, just to make sure no one was breathing on the other side. Weeks passed. Nothing happened. Life slowly started to feel normal again. I went back to work. I saw friends. I told myself I had been unlucky once, and it was over now. Then one night, as I was getting ready for bed, I noticed something small. The bathroom cabinet under the sink was open. I stood there staring at it, my mind racing through excuses. Maybe I left it open earlier. Maybe I forgot. I closed it and stood still listening. I didn't hear anything. I checked every room. Everything looked normal. Still, I didn't sleep that night. After that, there were other moments. My phone charger moved slightly from where I always left it. A kitchen chair not pushed in all the way. Things so small they were easy to explain away, but familiar enough to make my stomach turn. I never caught anyone. I never saw proof. And that was the worst part. A few months later, I searched my name online out of curiosity. That's when I found a short police blotter article from a nearby town. It mentioned a man arrested for breaking into occupied homes and hiding inside for days at a time. The article didn't include a photo. It didn't list his name. It just said he had escaped custody during transport. I don't know if it was him. No one could tell me. Sometimes late at night, I still wake up for no clear reason. The apartment is silent.
Too silent.
I lie there, staring at the ceiling, listening for anything out of place. I think about how calm he was when I saw him, how he didn't rush, how he didn't panic, how he stood in my doorway and watched me leave. And I keep coming back to the same thought. If I hadn't heard those footsteps, if I hadn't turned on that light, I might never have known he was there at all. Even now, years later, I can't shake the feeling that someone like him doesn't just stop. They don't disappear. They learn. They adapt. They move on to the next quiet place. The next normal house. The next person who thinks they're alone. And some nights, when everything is still, I can't help but wonder if the only reason I'm safe is because I noticed him first. I eventually settled into a routine again, but it was a different kind of normal. I stopped trusting silence. When a room was too quiet, I noticed it. When a sound didn't repeat itself, I remembered it. I became aware of things I never paid attention to before, like how long it took footsteps to pass outside my door, or how often the building's main door opened at night. I didn't tell many people the full story. Most wouldn't understand it anyway. They'd ask why I didn't fight back, why I didn't notice sooner, why I didn't hear him earlier. I stopped trying to explain that part. The scariest thing wasn't what he did. It was how easily he blended into my life without leaving clear signs. About a year later, I drove past my old neighborhood by accident. I didn't mean to. I took a wrong turn coming back from work and ended up on the same street. The house looked the same. Same paint. Same porch light. Someone new lived there. There were toys in the yard. A car in the driveway. I sat at the stop sign longer than I should have. I wanted to warn them. I wanted to knock on the door and tell them to check their closets, their spare keys, their routines. But I didn't. I knew how it would sound. I knew how easily it could be brushed off. So I drove away. That night, I barely slept. What still bothers me is how personal it all felt. He didn't steal anything valuable. He didn't damage the house. He didn't rush when I saw him. Everything he did suggested patience.
Planning. Control.
Like he wasn't there for things.
He was there for me.
I sometimes wonder how many other houses he's been inside. How many people went to work every day, came home every night, and never realized someone else was sharing their space. Someone learning their habits. Someone waiting for the right moment. The police never called again.
No updates. No closure.
Just silence. And silence, I've learned, can be dangerous. Even now, I still pause before turning on lights when I enter a room. I still scan corners without meaning to. I still listen for breathing that isn't mine. When I stay in hotels, I check under the bed and inside the closet before I unpack. I don't tell myself it's silly. I tell myself it's smart. Because I know how easily a normal life can be watched from the shadows. Some nights, when I'm half asleep, I wake up with the strong feeling that someone is nearby. Not moving. Just present. I lie still, listening, counting my breaths, waiting for proof that I'm alone. Most of the time, nothing happens. But every once in a while, I hear something small. A soft shift. A faint sound that doesn't belong. And in those moments, I don't wonder if someone could be watching me. I wonder how long they've already been there. Because the truth I can't escape is this. The most frightening part wasn't running for my life. It wasn't seeing his face. It wasn't knowing he had a knife. It was realizing that danger doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes, it just waits quietly in the dark, until you finally notice the footsteps,